Hi, I'm Michelle the Irritable Vegan. I'm here to share my vegan low FODMAP story and hopefully take some of the BS out of IBS. Today I'm going to be talking about 12 months of low FODMAP and I'm going to be answering a question I get asked a lot. Am I cured? Keep watching to find out. So before we get into the video, let's just clear up some confusion. When I say 12 months of low FODMAP, what I mean is working systematically through all the phases of a low FODMAP diet, and even now I'm still learning, exploring and experimenting with my foods and my tolerances. It doesn't mean 12 months of extreme restriction and lingering around in the strict elimination phase, because hopefully, as you'll see as we go through the video, every single phase of the diet plays its part. So I've no shame in admitting that when I first started the low FODMAP diet back in the autumn of 2017, it was a little bit of a false start. I was completely confused by all the conflicting information I was seeing, from the book that I'd been given by my dietitian, to the things I was reading and seeing online, to the information in the Monash app. I just couldn't bring all of those things together. And I felt completely bewildered and a little bit let down by the NHS when it soon became obvious that any kind of follow-up appointment with the dietitian was as rare as a mythical beast. And unfortunately my follow-up appointment even then got put back, even later, and it soon became apparent that I was going to be expected to do the full 8-week elimination phase, all 9 weeks of my challenge phase and beyond, with nothing more, no more guidance than just the basic little information leaflet I'd been given at my first appointment with the dietitian. So after committing to a strict 8-week elimination phase as best as I could without any further professional guidance, by the time we got to Christmas I pretty much abandoned the whole idea and virtually gave up well into the new year. But it was also at this point that I started to realise that as soon as the old foods and habits started to creep back in, so did my symptoms. So what I'm really trying to say is that in the initial stages of my elimination phase, for me, there was no eureka moment, there was no massive shift and improvement in my symptoms, and there was definitely no illusions of it being a cure. And it was only when I started to slide back into my default diet that I really appreciated how much I'd managed to get my symptoms under control and how much worse they got when I was less mindful of the choices I was making. And it was also around this time that I really understood the impact that stress was having on my symptoms. Now, even as a child, I'd always been aware of the fact that my IBS became much worse with big stressful events such as exams, holidays, interviews, bereavements, moving house, all the typical things that are generally known as stress triggers. But I was much less aware, even up until a year ago, of how the day-to-day stress and chronic anxiety that I was experiencing had such an effect on me. So fast forward to the beginning of this year, when I'd removed myself from a stressful working environment and I really started to think maybe there really is something to this low FODMAP diet, and that's when I decided to get a bit more serious about things. So once again I committed to a strict elimination phase, but by now I knew that eliminating FODMAPs did help my symptoms, so there was no need to go right back to the start and do a whole strict 8-week elimination phase. All I really needed to do was to get my symptoms under control, which I managed to do in probably less than 2 weeks. And that brings me on to one of the most positive, long-lasting side effects for me of the low FODMAP diet, and that's having the knowledge and the confidence to be able, in most situations, to bring my symptoms down to a base tolerable level that I can handle much faster than ever before, whereas in the past I was pretty oblivious to exactly how and why I was experiencing flare-ups, and I didn't really have any tools or techniques to be able to give myself any kind of relief. So once I'd got myself back to a fairly symptom-free state, I began my challenge phase, which is where the real fun begins. And personally, I think that it's only at this stage that you really start to learn exactly what the low FODMAP diet's all about, and you really get into the nitty-gritty of identifying your triggers and flare-ups. And the biggest lesson I learned from the challenge phase is to listen to my body and respond accordingly. We're all so unique that the schedule for re-challenging, as helpful as it can be to have it there, should only ever be seen as a best case guide and not some kind of goal that you need to aim for. One of the worst things you can do is jump from challenge to challenge to challenge, causing flare up after flare up after flare up, and never really get into the heart of your true tolerances and triggers. And speaking of getting a clear picture, from my own experience, from talking to lots of other FODMAPers, from research that I've done online, it seems fairly normal to get conflicting or confusing results during your challenges. Things like reacting to something one day and tolerating it the next, confusing or conflicting results from your challenges. And the best thing I can say to you is try not to get too discouraged or too disheartened when this happens. Take a really close look at any other possible factors other than just concentrating on the FODMAPs. And if nothing jumps out immediately, then just make a note to revisit and re-challenge at a later date. Which brings me really nicely to where I am now in my low FODMAP life. So I'm now in the maintenance or the personalised phase. And when you hear people say that a low FODMAP diet is not for life, is only to be used in the short term, what they're referring to is the really strict elimination phase and the highly controlled challenge phase. The truth is that if you get any relief at all of your symptoms from a low FODMAP diet, then you're likely going to remain or keep returning to your version of the personalised phase for life. And just as the name suggests, this phase looks different for everybody. So to the untrained eye, my diet now is exactly the same as a regular vegan diet that I was eating way back in 2015. I've been able to successfully reintroduce most foods and most FODMAPs back into my diet, which is essentially the whole point of a low FODMAP diet. That's to be able to eat in the least restrictive, most inclusive way for you and your body, whilst keeping all of your symptoms under control. And whilst nobody else would necessarily know that I'm eating any differently now that I'm here in the personalised phase, what I'm actually constantly doing is monitoring and tweaking and adapting the foods that I'm eating and choosing based on everything my body's telling me, based on my stress levels, based on what's happening in my life at the time, even how the seasons are affecting me, the time of the month, and so many subtle factors which are constantly shifting and balancing what is now my new base level. And that might sound like a lot of hard work, but in reality it's as simple as not eating bread for my tea because I ate bread for my dinner, or eating a very low FODMAP diet the day before and after a big night out. So to answer the question you've all been waiting for, after 12 months of low FODMAP, am I cured? And the simple answer is no. And after a lifetime of IBS, I never really expect to be. So some of you might be thinking, then what's the point? Why bother? Why go through all this? Well, for me, the point is that we all have to make these decisions every single day regarding the groceries that we buy, the way that we cook, the food that we eat. And the only difference now is that I'm going to make all these choices in an informed way and literally go with my gut instinct instead of leaving how I feel on any given day up to chance. And for me, the confidence and the knowledge alone that I'm able to do that now makes everything worth it. I come across so many people who are looking for others to give them the answer to make them better. And often that means they're missing the entire point of the low FODMAP diet, which is to give your body the time and the attention it needs to tell you exactly what you need and what works for you. There's no cure, there's definitely no magic pill, and there's no shortcuts. But what there is real potential for relief and for life enhancing improvements, and a deep, deep understanding and knowledge of yourself, your body and your condition. But if you don't get started and give it a chance, you'll never know. Wherever you are in your own low FODMAP journey, I'd love to hear about it and continue the conversation in the comments below. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.